All right, so with no further ado, let's get to Proposition 2.
So thank you. I'm Edgar Cabral with the Legislative Analyst Office. Before I start talking about Prop 2, I do want to briefly talk about our office and our role in the ballot measure process. So we are a nonpartisan advisor to the state legislature, and state law has a specific role for our office when it comes to the ballot measures. So specifically, we must prepare an impartial analysis that describes the measure, and then also provide an estimate of the fiscal effects of the measure on state and local government. And that information is included in the voter information guide that's published by the Secretary of State. So what you'll be hearing from us today is based on that work that we've done for that publication. Okay, so now moving on to Prop 2. So Proposition 2 would authorize the state to sell $10 billion in general obligation bonds for school and community college facilities. So briefly, just to give you a little bit of background on how we fund school and community college facilities in California, over the last few decades, the state has, it's really been a shared relationship between the state and local districts, school districts and community college districts. And in general, both the state and local governments have relied on general obligation bonds to cover their portion of the costs. The state by passing statewide ballot measures like Prop 2, and locals by passing their own local measures that typically require a 55% vote from their voters. So in K-12 education, there is a school facility program that has been around for more than 2 decades, and that typically statewide bond measures, bond funds are deposited into an account where that fund can be allocated for these projects. And that school facility program has 2 major elements. There's one that's for new construction, so building new schools, and then there's another that's for modernization, which is for renovating existing buildings that are more than 25 years old. For community colleges, it works a little differently. There's local districts submit their projects to the statewide chancellor's office, and then there's a prioritization that occurs, kind of thinking about what might be the most important priority projects, and then the specific projects are actually funded in the state budget every year. So in terms of Proposition 2, of the $10 billion, $8.5 billion is for K-12 education. Of that amount, $4 billion is for modernization, $3.3 billion is for new construction, and then there's $600 million apiece for career technical education facilities and for charter school facilities. For community colleges, there's $1.5 billion, and there's no specific earmark associated with, in terms of the specific kinds of community college projects that would be funded. There are also several minor changes to the K-12 school facility program in Proposition 2. I won't go into all of them, but I will just highlight a couple of important ones. First, there is a change in what the expectation is for the local match. So in the school facility program, typically for a new construction project, the state covers 50% of the costs. And then for a modernization project, the state covers 60% of the costs. There's a potential for additional funding to be covered by the state, just another 5 percentage points, so from 50 to 55%, or from 60 to 65%. And the exact percentage will depend on a school district's percentage of their student population that's either low income or an English learner, and also looking at the property values per student within the district. So a larger proportion of low income students and a relatively lower share of property values per student would mean that there would be a higher share provided. There's also an additional, within the modernization program, there's an additional add-on that allows districts to receive additional funding if they want to build a new building or if they want to renovate an existing building for transitional kindergarten. And transitional kindergarten is a program it's a program for 4-year-olds in California, and the state is in the process of expanding that program so that by the 25-26 school year, all 4-year-olds would be eligible for transitional kindergarten, and so there are some facility needs locally to make sure that they can serve all students. So those are the 2 major ones that I'll highlight there. In terms of the fiscal effect, we estimate that the cost of paying off the $10 billion in bonds would be $500 million annually over 35 years, and that would cover both the principal and interest associated with the bonds.
All right, thank you so much. So if you have questions, get them ready. We're going to go through a few more things on this, but This, as with any bond measure, was put on the ballot by the state legislature. They all have to go before the people because it's our tax money that will be paying back the bond. So the groups that are in support of this in terms of endorsements, we have basically labor groups and educational groups, but I wanted to highlight the very unusual thing, which is that both major political parties are in favor of this one. So, we thought bipartisanship was dead, but here we go. The only group that's come out officially against this is the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. They're always concerned about tax money, right, about spending for the state, and so they're against it for that reason. And the newspaper endorsements, it's kind of split. We have the San Francisco Chronicle, Sacramento Bee, LA Times endorsing it, and then in opposition, East Bay Times, Southern California News Group, and San Diego Union Tribune. And then in terms of funding for the contributions, we've got basically building organizations and teaching organizations. So the building organizations, of course, would end up doing the work to do the construction on the sites, and obviously the teaching organizations want it for their reasons. No spending against. So when we look at these, we can, kind of think about the lopsided spending for advertising. You may have seen some ads in favor of this one, probably none against, because there's no money against. So what questions do you have on this one?
I'm not sure. Is this on?
Yeah, get close to it.
Okay. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. So one of the biggest questions that I have, I understand that how it will be allocated, a significant portion is on disadvantaged schools and that type of thing. But many times when you have districts that are smaller as well as disadvantaged, they don't have the staff to even know how to apply for this money. So it still ends up going to those that are larger districts that have the significant staff that can actually apply for this type of money. What type of, supports are there, or are there any supports in here for those where you have a small school district, maybe it's only 2,000 kids or 5,000 kids or less, and they're very poor, very rural? How do they get the funding for this?
So there are actually a few things that are included in Proposition 2. One is that there is a set-aside amount, I believe it's 10%, for small school districts, which is defined as those that have less than 2,500 students. So that the program is typically a first-come, first-served basis. So that set-aside means that for those, if it takes some more time to get an application in, that there would be some amount set aside there. There is an additional $5 million that's included. It's not something I covered here, but it's really building off of federal funding that the state received that's intended to support small and rural school districts with their facilities needs. And so I believe there was $5 million that was provided by the federal government recently, and the Prop 2 would provide an additional $5 million with the intent being that money could serve or support additional school districts that might need help with getting some of their applications in and addressing their facility needs.
Any other questions on Prop 2? All right.